हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज के वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे डेरेक वॉलकॉट की पोम अ फार क्राई फ्रॉम अफ्रीका के बारे में। पोएट के बारे में हम पहले ही एक वीडियो में डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, जिसका लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन में। चलिए आज पोम को डिस्कस करते हैं। पोम को इन डेप्थ डिस्कस करने से पहले जान लेते हैं उसके कुछ की फीचर्स। Walcott's A Far Cry from Africa explores post-colonial identities, encapsulating the struggle between African roots and colonial influence. The poem is based around these struggles in Africa. One would presume it is at least partially autobiographical, and so it's a very safe assumption that the narrative voice is indeed Walcott's own. The poem is written in free verse. It is presented in two stanzas, one consisting of 21 lines and the other consisting of 11. It does not allow a strict rhyming pattern, although end rhymes features prominently throughout the poem. The effect of this is that the poem has a stilted, disjointed feel which mirrors the feeling expressed within the poem. The rhythm is also inconsistent, although the line length are similar to beats in each line alter, which again adds to the sense of discord. The poem is deeply rooted in Africa. The language used helps to make the poem feel culturally African. The title is in itself fairly interesting. It certainly has a double meaning. The obvious meaning is that it is using the phrase, which means that the events are far removed from what you expect in Africa. But actually, I think the title is subversive and is supposed to be taken very literally, meaning that in Africa there are people crying. पोम को डिस्कस करते लाइन्स 1 to 4. A wind is ruffling the tawny pelt of Africa, kick you quick as flies, batten upon the blood streams of the welded. Corpses are scattered through a paradise. The first two lines reference the Kikuyu. This is one of the biggest tribes in Kenya. It is an interesting use of imagery. Here, as they are described as being as quick as flies, the poet talks of them being massacred, and in the fourth line, he makes a really striking comparison between the welded area, which he considers a paradise, and the fact it is littered with corpses. Rhyme is used in the opening section with an ABAB pattern. This might make you come to expect that to be a recurring pattern, but this is not the case, and this helps give the poem a stilted edge. Lines 5 to 9. Only the warm colonel of carrion cries, waste no compassion on these separate dead. Statistics justify and scholars seize the salience of colonial policy. What is that to the white child hacked in bed? The fifth line, we see the use of alliteration. Worms are picked on here, being referred to as the colonel of carrion. The suggestion being that where you find rotten flesh, you find worms. He personifies them through and gives them an almost militant voice as they exclaim, "Waste no compassion on these separate dead." This gives them a villainous quality. In the eighth line, he refers to the locals as salient. This is a clever piece of imagery. It gives the impression that these people are isolated. It also has a double meaning with military connotations. I think that the point the poet is trying to make is how the colonials used their data and skew facts in order to portray the Kikuyu as savages. Of course, this doesn't tell the full story. I guess then that this whole begging section is laden with irony, maybe even dramatic irony, as an informed reader would realize that these views aren't an accurate description of the issues that have existed in Africa. 10 to 13. Two savages expandable as Jews, stretched out by beaters, the long rushes break in a white dust of abysses whose cries have wheeled since civilization's dawn. In the 10th line, we see a very powerful metaphor as Walcott draws on a comparison between the atrocities being committed here and the ones committed by the Nazis during the Second World War. At least, that's what one would assume by referring to Jews as expandable. Once again, a far cry from Africa turns to imagery and the use of nature. Here, abysses are used and their cries reference. According to the narrator, these cries have wheeled since civilization's dawn. I feel this is probably a metaphor for the repeated slaughter and genocide of civilizations, highlighting that this is an issue that has been prominent throughout the history of mankind. Of course, this is conjecture on my part. Lines 14 to 17 from the parched river or beast teeming plain. The violence of beast on beast is read as natural law, but upright man seeks his divinity by inflicting pain. The next four lines follow what have come before in creating a really visceral image. Walcott uses repetition of the word beast here in order to cement his comparison. The suggestion here is then that the men that carry out the atrocities may as well be animals. He then goes on to attack religion by suggesting that man seeks his divinity by inflicting pain. 18 to 21. Delirious as these worried beasts, his voice turns to the tightened carcass of a drum, while he calls courage still that native dread of the white beast contracted by the dead. The next four lines are really interesting. It isn't totally clear who the he that is referenced in these lines is, but I'm assuming it is supposed to represent mankind. If this is the case, then these words are pretty damning here. They're described as delirious, and once again we see the word beast employed. There is once again the use of graphic description using words like carcass and dread here help to convey the dark and grim tone. There is a lovely piece of wordmanship here as Walcott uses the phrase white peace. This is used almost as an oxymoron, as the peace he is describing is born of the multiple deaths, just another example of a strong use of irony throughout the poem. Lines 20 to 23. Again, brutish necessity wipes its hands upon the napkins of a dirty cause again. There is a wonderfully glib line here as the process of wiping one's hand. This innocuous act is made powerful by being allied to the idea of man, or perhaps more specifically, the white man, being dismissive about what is going on. Metaphor is used fantastically here. It is so thinly veiled as to almost be construed as sarcastic. 4 to 27. A waste of our compassion as with Spain. The gorilla wrestles with the Superman. I who am poisoned with the blood of both. Where shall I turn, divided to the vein? In these lines, he uses the phrase a waste of our compassion as with Spain. Once again, this is very sarcastic and certainly not the view of the narrator himself, who clearly, as we later see, wrestles with his lineage and heritage. The use of superhuman helps to date the piece and highlights that it is contemporary and that these are current affairs. He refers to himself as being poisoned by the blood of both. We can assume that this is referring to his mixed heritage. Lines 28 to 33. I who have cursed the drunken officer of British rule, how choose between this Africa and the English tongue I love? Betray them both, or give back what they give. How can I face such slaughter and be cool? How can I turn from Africa and live? This final section of the poem really brings us to the crux of the entire poem. The poet struggles to deal with his lineage and his association between that lineage and the atrocities carried out by those nations. By the same token, he is torn as he clearly has an affection for the language of his mother tongue. Devices metaphors. Walcott uses metaphors to describe the destruction and death in Africa and Europe, such as colonial of Carrion. Ironic statements. Walcott uses ironic statements to describe the destruction and death in Africa and Europe, such as corpses are scattered through a paradise. Animal imagery. Walcott uses animal imagery such as lions, flies, worms, and abysses to convey his feelings and point of view. For example, he compares Africa to a lion with a tawny pet and the Kikuyu tribe of native Africans to blood sucking flies. Rhyming. The poem doesn't have a regular rhyme scheme, but some lines have full rhymes and others have slant rhymes. Full rhymes tend to create harmony, while slant rhymes suggest tension. Line length. The line length is generally consistent but sometimes expands to 12 syllables or shrinks to themes. Identity. The poem explores the conflict of identity that the speaker experiences as he struggles to find his own identity. Culture. The poem depicts the imbalance between the colonizer and the colonized, and the point of pain of the speaker who is caught between two cultures. Evolution. The poem suggests that evolution is in the animal kingdom dictates who wins and loses through violence. Male responsibility. The poem emphasizes that the male of the species is responsible for war, pain, and peace. Colonial settlement. The poem uses the metaphor of a napkin to represent the dirty cause of colonial settlement and injustice. The poem was written during the Mau Mau uprising, a bloody battle between European settlers and the Kikuyu tribe in Kenya in the 1950s. थैंक यू। आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको पसंद आई। कैसी लगी हमें कमेंट करके बताएं और हमें ये भी कमेंट करके बताएं कि आप आने वाले वीडियोस किस टॉपिक पर देखना चाहते हैं। अगर वीडियो अच्छी लगी तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माय चैनल। मिलते हैं कल एक और इन्फॉर्मेटिव वीडियो के साथ शाम 4 बजे। थैंक यू।